A while later, as the air bubbles were emerging toward the surface, Lu Sheng gradually began to open his eyes and exited the dream space. Our boy had been carefully studying and training in the various newly discovered skills within the dream space, and after a month, he had mastered their fundamentals. His eyes were full of exhaustion, and despite having slept for more than a month, he was neither hungry nor fatigued since his mutant body had constantly taken care of nourishing him. He clenched his fist tightly, causing golden energy to appear around his body. He closed his eyes and focused. His external wounds had already healed, and his damaged organs had also regenerated. During this time, he had finally completely eliminated the remnants of power from the powerful level 10 warrior who had attacked him. Now all that remained was to wait a little longer for the small injury and his spiritual force to heal as well. He rested his hand on his knee and, with a calm gaze, prepared to stand up. Almost everything was ready, so he decided it was time to leave this place. The eyes on his abdomen activated and began scanning the area. Lu Sheng's eyes were filled with seriousness as he gathered momentum and started ascending towards the surface at great speed, creating air bubbles. The problem of his mutated body would resolve itself as soon as he left the abyssal cave. Once he exited this place, the rules being suppressed by the power of the cave would disappear, and without the help of the essence of flesh and blood from exotic beasts, his body would return to normality, and all alien cells would die. Once our boy ascended a little, something happened. The tentacles on his back started moving abruptly. He didn't pay much attention to it, thinking it must be something normal. But just then, the 4 tentacles shot backward, coiled up and grabbed tightly onto the stones, causing Lu Sheng's body to stop abruptly, his mind filled with confusion, making him turn around. His eyes spread in surprise, leaving him in shock. His attention fixed on the tentacles, and he was somewhat furious. Now that our boy was not moving, a malevolent energy began to emerge from the depths of the cave, causing a red flash to appear. Lu Sheng started observing carefully, remembering that this cave was just like an S-level cave, but the difference being that in the depths of the ocean there was a consciousness from another world, which had noticed that Lu Sheng had been resting in this place for some time. Now he was high-quality food and a good candidate. The energy became more intense, as what hid within it wanted to confuse Lu Sheng into staying. But as expected, he wasn't foolish at all. Consumed by rage, he grabbed one of the tentacles tightly. Lu Sheng, using his power, he grabbed another tentacle and began staring intently at the flash. He clenched his teeth and with little effort snapped one of the tentacles. The tentacle split in two, and the eye on it filled with tears upon feeling pain. Lu Sheng's gaze fixed on it. He was furious, because the tentacle kept clinging to the rocks. He mentioned that he couldn't be blamed for splitting it in half since after all this was his body. He clenched his teeth due to panic and went on alert, being aware that he couldn't stay in this place any longer since the self-awareness of the cells was becoming increasingly stronger, and no one knew what problems were going to arise. Afterwards, Lu Sheng extended his hand toward the surface, and using all his strength, began swimming towards the surface. The first thing was to get out of the cave, then solve the problem of the cells, and finally rebuild his stellar immortal body. Only with this would he be able to become a great hero again. But then something happened, and Lu Sheng's eyes filled with surprise and panic. A powerful golden energy began emerging from the immortal cells concentrated on his forehead. Lu Sheng stopped swimming, turned around, and his eyes widened in fear, realizing that the consciousness hidden in the cave had reached him and was not going to let him leave this place so easily. Dozens of red eyes appeared and began staring at Lu Sheng. Consciously, he started releasing energy, and his attention fixed on the eyes. He remained silent, not knowing what to do. Several tentacles began approaching our boy at great speed. He started observing carefully and soon realized that it was using force upon seeing that it hadn't been able to deceive him. He was not going to stand idly by doing nothing. He began to concentrate, power in his hand, and with a furious gaze full of determination, revealed that they were not on the same path, and forcing something that was not going to work would not bring good results. Our boy concentrated the power of the cells and transformed his arm into a powerful and sharp blade. He adopted an offensive stance, ready to defend himself from the attack. Once the tentacles approached to capture him, Lu Sheng moved at the speed of light, and using his sharp blade, cut the tentacles into pieces. His eyes began to shine with determination, showing that he wanted to get out of this place alive. Now that Lu Sheng was out of danger, he moved like lightning and got away from the eyes. Upon noticing this, the consciousness, who was furious, manifested and began to roar. In an instant he left the cave, started saying goodbye to the consciousness, and with a smile mocked it by saying there was no need for it to accompany him. Instead of feeling furious, the eyes of the consciousness filled with joy, as if it had an ace up its sleeve or another hidden plan to capture Lu Sheng. He thought it was out of danger, but then a powerful energy appeared. Lu Sheng's eyes widened in fear, making him sweat. A voice began to sound in his head, asking what he found so funny. Lu Sheng prepared to flee from this place once and for all, but just before he could move, a powerful portal similar to that of the level 10 warrior who had left him almost dead emerged. Behind him, Lu Sheng was paralyzed with fear, and his eyes widened in confusion, not knowing what to do to get out of this place. His body began to be sucked into the portal, and it didn't took him long to realize that this was the abyss. The persuasion plan had only been a facade of consciousness, and its true purpose was to deceive him into entering the abyss. He tried to move but was unable. The portal connected to a different space where there were several planets. Lu Sheng appeared in this place and began floating, and it didn't take long for him to realize that the place was dangerous. His body had changed and now seemed to be made of energy instead of matter. The portal started closing, our boy's attention focused on it, and instead of panicking, remained calm. It didn't surprise him that people who entered the abyss never returned, since the only way back closed off. And although it seemed like there wasn't any danger in this place, those trapped here were lost forever in countless spaces. Lu Sheng's eyes were shining with tranquility. After thinking calmly, he realized that something was not right. The portal had not disappeared but was in another place, only he had not found it yet. Otherwise, level 10 and 11 warriors would not be able to come and go from Earth. The only issue now is that he did not know how to find the portal to return. Just then, one of the tentacles gazed fixed on him, and it began pointing to one side. The tentacle started touching our boy's chest, catching his attention. Lu Sheng's eyes filled with surprise as he realized that it knew where the portal to return was. His mind became filled with confusion since he did not know how it could know where the portal was. Wondering if the key to entering and leaving this place lay in alien cells, he decided to stop thinking about it and go take a look. His eyes began to shine with determination, asking it to indicate where the portal was. The tentacle started pointing in which direction to go, and our boy began following the instructions, heading towards the portal. He started observing the planets and couldn't help but smile with a joyful expression. He realized that this space was truly peculiar. It was indescribable. He felt as if he were in a space of nothingness. Our boy began following the instructions of the demonic cells, and then the tentacles started moving with excitement. Lu Sheng began observing and couldn't help but smile upon realizing that the intense emotion of joy from the cells was very strong. which meant they were close to the portal. His happiness did not last long as a powerful ball of evil energy began to manifest above him. Lu Sheng froze in place, not knowing what was happening. His gaze filled with fear, making him panic as something was wrong and the consciousness had come to catch him. The eye that was on the tentacle filled with malice. Lu Sheng became furious and started shouting, calling the tentacle bastard. This place had an exit, and it was the exit where the consciousness that wanted to catch and devour him was. The malignant energy began to grow more intense, and not long after, a giant eye and several small eyes appeared and started staring fixedly at our boy. The consciousness was happy to have found Lu Sheng. Lu Sheng began to observe the eye in silence, paralyzed with fear, not knowing what kind of warrior this monster was. The eye used its power, making a hand made of spiritual energy. It prepared to catch Lu Sheng. He raised his head and saw how little by little the hand was getting closer. The hand tried to catch him, but at that moment, Lu Sheng moved at great speed, barely saving himself. His gaze fixed on the eyes. He couldn't help but grit his teeth and feel desperate. The tentacles emerging from his body stood in front of him and prepared to attack him. And upon seeing this, he couldn't help but panic even more. Voice of the penguins. Lu Sheng turned around and his eyes filled with confusion. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video. While the tentacles were devouring everything that moved at the bottom of the ocean, Lu Sheng began to concentrate, forming bubbles in the water. He closed his eyes and decided it was time to enter the dream space to train a bit while his body took care of feeding him. The 3 eyes on his abdomen were shining intensely, searching for food. In the dream space, everything was chaos, buildings were destroyed, and there was no trace of human life, making it a perfect place to train. Once Lu Sheng arrived in the dream space, a zombie thought it had found food and tried to attack him by surprise. But our boy reacted in time. He clenched his fist, turned around, and delivered a strong punch to the zombie's jaw. His mission was to harvest the remaining memories of this place's great warriors. Another zombie appeared. Lu Sheng delivered a powerful punch, defeating it without much effort. He began to observe the zombie's corpse with a calm expression. In total, he had cleared 3 streets, defeating a total of 8 zombies with the same power as martial warriors. Among them were 5 level 7 and 3 level 8 zombies, with power similar to that of a grandmaster. In front of him was a pile of corpses from the zombie warriors he had defeated. His attention was fixed on them. Nowadays, with perfect martial arts, he had a total of 50 types of zombies with different martial wills, all fused with his willpower. As he observed the corpses, a question came to his mind. He didn't know if there would be a qualitative transformation when there were 100 types of zombies. He decided to stop thinking about the matter, intertwining his hands, closing his eyes, and sitting on the ground to meditate. Now it was just time to wait for his wounds to heal a bit more so that later he could eliminate the cells before leaving. But then he remembered something, opened his eyes, and with a serious gaze, decided to check the information in the system's database. He called Aing and asked her to access his personal information. The sexy Aing began to manifest herself, closed her eyes, and nodded her. Our boy started watching her in silence. Not long after, several red windows of the system appeared in front of him. Lu Sheng's eyes filled with curiosity and he began reading the information. Now he was sure that the information in the system's database about his future was fabricated. But what was clear was that the other stored data were real. Lu Sheng placed his hand under his chin, and with a curious gaze began carefully reading through the information displayed on the system window. Martial arts inheritance, medicinal recipes, resource points, they were very important aids. And the key to accessing deeper hidden information within the system was obtaining more permissions. Just then, the eyes of our boy widened with surprise. He couldn't believe what his eyes were seeing. In front of him was a window with the photograph of Zhao Ji, and in another photo appeared Lu Shang next to the corpse of the martial saint from the extreme dojo. In Ninghai, after severely injuring the martial saint from the extreme dojo, Lu Shang had disappeared while being gravely injured after the fight. However, after 3 years he had returned to kill Zhao Ji, defeating martial saint Lin Zhengyu and overcoming martial saint Tan Zhong. Lu Shang knew that this information was false since Zhao Ji hadn't died, but he decided not to pay much attention to it as sooner or later he was going to die. The system began to display personal information about Lu Shang. After a battle, our boy's body was surrounded by golden energy. At the age of 25 he had reached level 9, becoming the youngest martial saint in the history of the martial path, known as a perfect being, showing his strength to everyone, and there was no worthy rival capable of facing him. Lu Shang appeared in front of hundreds of men dressed in black clothes. At the age of 30, he had founded the sacred martial sanctuary and spread martial arts throughout the world, making a massive contribution to the development of human martial civilization, and under his tutelage, 10 more martial saints emerged. Seeing this, his eyes filled with joy, causing a proud smile to spread across his face. Previously he remembered having read that he was known as the strongest being under heaven, now that he had reached a higher level, and did not know why he had lost that title. His mind filled with curiosity, and he decided to keep reading to find out. The system began to display the image of Lu Shang releasing a powerful and malevolent energy. At 100 years old, he had reached level 10, thus becoming the first level 10 expert in the history of the martial path, paving the way for level 10 for future generations, and receiving the honorary title of martial ancestor. In the following 2 years, the world lost track of Lu Shang, and people came to the conclusion that the martial saint might have left Blue Planet and traveled towards the stars of the universe. While little Ying was floating nearby, a smile spread across Lu Shang's face, and he couldn't help but feel happy. He didn't know what it meant to be a martial ancestor, questioning if it was a title similar to Confucius from his past life, someone far superior to any god that existed on earth, and could be considered a supreme name destined to endure for generations. Lu Shang's eyes filled with surprise and fear, causing him to start sweating. He panicked, realizing that something was not right. With an expression full of fear, he began to recall when that bastard Zhao Ji had taken the card out of his mouth. The card was a protection talisman from a level 10 warrior, which demonstrated that this world should have originally had the path of level 10. He didn't know how it was possible that he had been the one to open this path to him. This was very strange, but he thought the reason behind it was that the information in the systems, the database, wasn't complete, causing a significant deviation in future predictions. Lu Shang calmed down, turned towards Ying, and with a calm expression explained that at the top of this world's pyramid there were still many secrets he did not understand. Now that he was a martial ancestor, he thought his access level should no longer be low, so he asked her to please check his permissions. Ying began to observe Lu Shang in silence, until several seconds later, she accessed the system's database, revealing that he had a historical evolution as a 10-star character. Lu Shang's eyes began to shine with excitement. He couldn't help but smile since before he only had a level 7 clearance, and now it had directly risen by 3 levels. He adjusted his jacket with his hand, and his attention focused on Ying. His eyes filled with joy because, according to his previous experiences, level 7 clearance opened the path to advance from 7 to 8. Now that he had reached level 10, the system should open the way for him to progress from level 10 to 11. He had completely cleared the path from level 9 to level 11, so he asked her to bring out all the cultivation techniques of level 11. Eyeing extended her hand toward the system window, and using her powers, she began to modify the system's information. Lu Shang started observing silently with a curious gaze, ready to see how to ascend to level 11. Not long after, the system began creating a window with books and several scrolls of parchment. Lu Shang waited until the system finished loading. The system window disappeared, leaving the books and scrolls of parchment on the ground. He picked up one of the books, opened it, and started reading attentively. The first 5 were more advanced chapters than he had learned before. The last 4 were new. His attention focused on a new technique called the Art of 5 Seasons Fists, which had been created by Wang Qi. It was said that in ancient times, between heaven and earth, besides spring, summer, autumn, and winter, there existed a 5th season. And when the 5th season arrived, 10 suns would appear in the sky. The light and heat were capable of burning mountains, rivers, and lands until they were dry and withered. All living beings perished under the scorching heat, turning the world into an oven. Lu Shang's eyes widened in surprise as he realized that the Art of 5 Seasons Fists traced back to ancient martial arts. To recreate the terrifying scene of 10 suns in the sky at once. For him, this martial art was grandiose and majestic. It turned out that Shi Xingning's supreme master level called 10 suns in the sky had been derived by imitating Wang Qi's fist style. Lu Shang closed the book, and his mind filled with curiosity. He picked up a scroll and decided it was time to read it. He opened the scroll and his expression changed, his gaze filled with confusion, his mind filled with questions and despair since he could not understand anything written on it. The scroll began to emit a powerful blue aura. Our boy's head started to smoke, but even so he decided to continue reading, making him feel furious. He read about the founder of the Yang Yishua technique and did not knowing what this technique was about or what relation it had with martial arts. For him, reading this was like reading a dictionary. Now his head hurts. But as he continued reading, his eyes widened in surprise. Even though he didn't understand it very well, this technique only talked about how to construct the internal universe, the connection between the external and internal universe and its construction. Additionally, it mixed a large number of theories of possibilities. To him, this was nothing more than an academic article and could not be considered a technique. Furthermore, this technique had a surprisingly high level. It didn't take him long to realize that this was the process for ascending from level 11 to level 12. Lu Shang, somewhat angry and confused, closed the scroll and left it on the ground. He was barely at level L8 and for now understood nothing, so he decided to forget about it and leave difficult things for later. He picked up another book, opened it with a curious expression, and began reading attentively. He decided that it was better to take a look at the 5 Seasons technique. He started imagining the entire universe. Honestly speaking, he knew that if he managed to learn how to use the internal universe, then he would obtain history's strongest supreme combat technique. No other martial art or martial skill could compare with it, since after all, no martial art could be fiercer than using an internal universe to strike someone. Lu Shang's eyes began to shine with seriousness and his attention fixed on the book. He had already reached the legendary 5th realm, and with this level 11 fist technique, no one knew what kind of power he was going to unleash. He started to gaze at his hand, which was emitting martial flames. His eyes were full of determination as he thought that with the fist of the 5 Seasons technique, he might even be able to challenge powerful warriors of level 10 or higher. He placed his hand over his chest and absorbed the power he had in his hand. His eyes began to shine with excitement, causing a smile to appear on his face. He clenched his fist and swore to kill the powerful level 10 warrior who had left him gravely injured the next time they met. Next to him was Aang, and her body was shining. He turned to her and started observing her and asked her to show all the content of the flame project. She started projecting a system window and explained that he did not have sufficient permissions to access the content. Lu Shang remained silently watching, not knowing what was happening. He placed his hand under his chin and his eyes filled with surprise. This did not seem strange to him, so he decided to elevate his permissions to level 11 before being able to unravel all the secrets of the dream space. He closed his eyes, started shaking his head, and using his hand he closed the system window. His most important goal now was to reach the 9th level from the 8th. He decided to see how the path to level 9 was achieved. He used the technique called total concentration, making golden flames appear around his body. First he had to complete the fusion of the body, energy, and spirit into a single entity. Then he had to connect with the sky and the earth using the force of the world to forge his own martial seal and build a martial projection. This was where the difference between the most powerful warriors really began to show. He began imagining the spirit of a powerful martial warrior with 4 arms, and compared to it, the user of the martial projection seemed like an ant. According to what was mentioned, the standard for a martial projection had different qualities. If the martial projection was less than 1,000 meters tall, it was low quality. From 1,000 to 500 meters tall it was medium quality, and more than 5,000 meters tall it was high quality. Lu Shang's eyes filled with seriousness, and he couldn't help but go into Our boy began to recall the martial projection of the martial saint from the Supreme. His miserable martial projection didn't even reach 500 meters, being of the lowest quality, and calling him a village martial saint was even too generous. The reality was that this guy only relied on earthly devotion to sustain his divinity, being trash. Lu Shang placed his hand under his chin and sank into thought. The martial projections condensed with natural breathing techniques and crystal visualization were both of maximum quality. His eyes began to shine with joy, as he had an endless number of techniques and martial arts at his disposal. If he could combine these superior quality projections and fuse them all into his perfect martial art, he didn't know what kind of projection would emerge. He started imagining the projection of the spirit of a powerful demon with a murderous gaze. Lu Shang closed the book and decided not to think too much about it since daydreaming would make him lose his way. And besides, fusing all this was incredibly difficult. He had no idea where to start. But it didn't matter because the first step was slowly merging his body, energy, and spirit. He began cracking his knuckles, and his eyes filled with excitement as a smile appeared on his face. In the end, if he managed to learn the 5 seasons fist technique with the strength of his ever-increasing immortal cells, even if he got stuck at the peak of level 8 for some time, he would still be able to kill martial saints as if they were mere chickens. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.